Hello, and welcome to the Trans Icelandic Broad Cast, your ongoing series on all things trans-related. I'm Andie Fontaine, news editor at the Reykjavik Grapevine.
I'm Sæborg Ninja, the treasurer of Trans Iceland.
And thanks for tuning in today. Today, we're going to get a little bit intimate, and for the squeamish, we will be talking about sex and the human body. Today, we'd like to give a little advice on dating trans women. This is specifically for cis men, because for one, cis men tend to be more likely to make some of the more common blunders when it comes to trying to date trans women, and this is also like related to our lived experience, as well.
And this is not exclusively for cis men. This is also for cis women, because they also do these blunders.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah.
It's just not as commonly in my experience in any event, but it is true. This applies to all cis people, as anybody really can make these mistakes, however well-intentioned you might be. And so that's why we would like to give a little advice to make things easier and a more pleasant experience for everybody involved. So starting from the top, I think it's important to get this out of the way.
Yeah.
Is that if you're a straight cis man, and let's say you're flipping through Tinder, and you see a trans woman and you think she's cute, you're still straight, okay? Because you're not gay, because, well, trans women are women. And if you're a woman and you see a trans woman and you think she's cute and you want to hook up with her, you're gay.
Yeah, or bi.
Or bi, of course.
It's
you're queer in some ways. But if you're a straight cis man and you're attracted to a trans woman, you're still straight. Don't worry. So if that's a problem for you anyway, you can relax. You're okay where that's concerned. But I don't know about you, Sæborg, but like one of the more common, often like opening questions that I've gotten in DMs from cis guys when the conversation starts is asking about the surgery, and this can be phrased in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
You know?
So how's your downstairs
business? Have you had the surgery? How far along are you in the transition?
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have a dick? You know, it can be range from like really roundabout to really blunt. And I must implore you, do not do this, please. And there's a number of reasons for this. Personally, like I think that if I were to open a conversation with a guy by asking him like very blunt questions about the particulars of his genitalia, with the implication that his size or his shape or whether or not he's circumcised matters a great deal to me, he'd probably be kind of annoyed with that. I would think.
I would think. Just like, do you have warts? Like down there on your dick?
Yes.
Just like open with this every time.
Yeah. And like it's also kind of presumptuous.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think?
Yeah. It's just like, before I get to know you, I need to know your...
Like, who's saying you're even going to get that far?
These are called private parts for a reason.
Yes. I mean, And if you're interested in having sex, if you're interested in having sex with a trans woman and you want to ensure that absolutely will not happen, then that's a great way to ensure that you won't get very far. But if we are interested in sleeping with you, like, that's going to come up.
Yeah, it'll come up. Or you can have a conversation about it, like if you've gone like really deep and like you're about to get intimate, just like if there is a reason why this matters a great deal, just just like be a person about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm very happily taken now with a trans woman, but I have dated men in the past, and if I was interested in a guy, then I'd let him know. I mean, that was usually my MO anyway. That was usually my strategy.
Yeah.
As it were. And because that's just how it is. Like, if you reach that level of trust with a person, then there's some things that that's one of the things that you're going to bring up. But if you open with this question, it's invasive, it's presumptuous, and it's not a great opener. Like, you know, if you were DMing a cis woman, unless you're a complete asshole, you probably wouldn't open by asking questions about the particulars of her genitalia.
Yeah, just like open with like, so when was your last period?
Like, are you shaved? Are you trimmed? You got a landing strip? Little heart shape?
Yeah. How would you describe your labia?
Yeah. You know, like, you wouldn't do that unless you're a complete goblin. Don't do that with us. Like, I think that should go without saying. It's also just not a really great topic of conversation in general.
Yeah. It's like,
within or without a dating context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if like that conversation goes off, it's like wow, you still don't really know anything about that person.
Mm-hmm.
Just know what they haven't. Yeah, I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah.
Like, if you get past the getting to know you process,
mm-hmm.
where it's like established that you have a rapport, you know, you can hold a conversation, then like an attraction builds up, then the conversation is, I think, in my experience anyway, just kind of like naturally goes in that particular direction to talk about logistics
mm-hmm.
and preferences and things like that, as it were. But in the course of the conversation, Sæborg, what are your feelings on gendered compliments?
They're good, like real good. I don't like the ones that are like, wow, you really transitioned kind of compliments. Because like that implies a thing about like I'm going from a place to a different place, and like,
wow, you look like a real woman.
Yeah, or like just like, wow, you've become so ladylike.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they feel kind of backhanded to me.
Yes.
Which is not a great feeling.
No, it definitely isn't.
Yeah.
But, you know, like saying that someone is pretty,
mm-hmm.
for example, or I like your hair, or you have really nice skin, and, you know, the types of gendered compliments that you would pay to any woman. Really.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really nice feeling. It's like we discussed on the last podcast, like gender euphoria. Like, when you gender a trans person correctly,
mm-hmm.
it can create a feeling of gender euphoria, and it's really nice and it's very endearing. I think the same thing applies to like wholesome, well-meaning gendered compliments as well.
Yeah.
I would think anyway. It's charming.
Yeah.
And well, yeah, the same goes also with like, and if you're not sure, because there are of course like non-binary trans as well,
mm-hmm.
in terms of like what kind of compliments to pay. There's of course gender neutral compliments, like you're very attractive, or you can just ask, what are your pronouns?
Yeah.
Not preferred pronouns. No one has preferred pronouns. Well, some people have preferred pronouns.
Yeah, it's also just a good question to ask if you're getting to know someone.
Yes.
Just like, hey, how should I address you? How do you not like to connect to people?
Mm-hmm.
These are very good questions to just like establish how to interact with someone.
Mm.
It's also just like a really good way to like, that's a much better first question than like, You got a dick.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are your pronouns? Because, I mean, like English, and especially Icelandic, are gendered languages, you know. It's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, Icelandic is extremely gendered. We can't really talk about a chair without having like gender be a big part of it. And just like most words are gendered in that way, so getting that like off the ground quick is a really good way to always speak correctly about that person.
Yes.
Locally, yeah.
Yes, I would think so.
Mm-hmm. It's much easier in English because like it's mostly just the pronouns that are gendered in like the grammatical language sense.
Yeah. So, and even like complementary adjectives. Some of them have like kind of flexible gender. Like you can talk about a handsome woman or a beautiful guy.
Yeah.
You know, even though the words themselves are not gendered, some of them do come with connotations of gender anyway.
Yeah.
So getting the pronouns out of the way first is a really good idea. Just to be able to establish that rapport, as you say, so that the conversation goes more smoothly and you know exactly how to flatter the person that you're talking to in a charming way, not in a gross, creepy way, which brings us to this other point.
The chaser.
The chasers. There's how would you describe the difference between a chaser and a guy who's simply attracted to a trans woman?
Fetishization in like the real essence, the feeling of I'm talking to a person and they are treating me like an object, maybe an object of worship or something, but it's still like an object, not a whole person.
Yes.
And the fact that being with me is a desired state that does not stem from me in any way.
Definitely so.
Yeah.
I've always when I've been asked this question myself, I've always said to me it's a difference between somebody coming on to me for what I am instead of who I am. You know?
Yeah.
Like I've always wanted to get with a trans girl. Like it's like I could be anybody then, you know? And it shows like zero interest in who I am as a person. So that's why it's a really good idea if you see some cutie and you're talking to her, you know, you've established the pronouns, you're avoiding any questions about genitalia, you've got great wholesome gendered compliments, that like you ask questions about. I mean, it seems so basic to talk about this, really. Like ask about like, what do you do for a living? What are your hobbies? Did you see this movie? Like, what's the last great book you read? Like things that are questions about like who we are as individuals is a much better approach than I've always wanted to get with a trans girl.
Yeah, or maybe just like argue about the ethics of cybernetics, which is a really good way to have a conversation, and probably my best date with a cis person. Yeah.
You talked about cybernetics.
Yeah, the ethics of it, and just like implementing like optional cybernetics within the body. Like, yeah.
It's like some transhumanism.
Yeah, some transhumanism shit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
I would definitely get my attention if somebody came at me with a question like this.
Yeah.
Definitely so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about something interesting.
Talk about something interesting.
Yeah.
Ask like questions about, you know, our interests, our hopes and dreams. Yeah. Or like just like, what did you think about Bruno Mars' performance on that? Did you see that on the other, like, you know, conversational stuff that like that shows that you have an interest in us as like individuals Like, if you have a fetish for trans girls,
you don't care what we think about Miley Cyrus's new single.
No. For example, what did you think about Miley Cyrus's new single?
I haven't heard it.
No. One suggestion that I would also like to offer is, how do I put this? Sometimes, like anybody else, sometimes we just want to hook up. Sometimes we're not interested in going on a date or a romantic interlude and a walk downtown, and we just want to hook up. But it's still a really good idea to at least offer, like, do you want to get a drink downtown, or do you want to meet for a coffee downtown? And to me, anyway, this shows that, like, you're willing to be seen in public with us. I mean, I know that sounds like, not a lot to ask anyway, but you'd really be surprised. Or actually, you probably would not be surprised.
No, Yeah, no. Like, I know I've known of plenty of relationships where people did not want to be seen in public with their partner, and, which is a new kind of fucked up that I've thankfully avoided myself. But it's also good to have, like, the venue in mind. Like, if you're going for drinks, like, don't go to a place that's like transphobic. Maybe pick out a place that, like, has a history or, like, a reputation for not having assholes. Like, just like having some kind of like hey, these are things we do not allow.
Yes.
Because you don't want to end the night with something really shitty and ruining the entire evening.
Yeah, for sure. What are some places, like, in downtown Reykjavik that you think are, like, especially trans friendly?
Gaukurinn, Miami, Curious, of course. I haven't gone to a lot of places downtown because, like, I just don't go out drinking much. But, like, definitely not Hverfisbarinn.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, I don't drink myself, but if you don't drink, like, if you're sober, like, you can ask someone out for a coffee or a tea. It doesn't have to be some late night thing. It can be a lunch date, even something innocuous like that. It, like, demonstrates that, like, you don't find your attraction to the person you're talking to shameful or something to hide, that this is something that you're comfortable with. And, whether we're interested in going out on a date or not, like, I think anyway that it at least demonstrates that you don't find your own attraction to be a shameful thing to hide anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing.
I think so too. I just want to touch on, though, like, a big tragedy last year. No, this year. There was a guy who'd been, like, in a relationship with a trans woman for, like, a while. He faced a lot of, like, homophobia, despite being a straight guy.
Yes.
Because this is where
misdirected homophobia.
Yeah, misdirected homophobia. And it's the fucking tragedy. And it's like, I understand that's rough. So, like, even if you're not dating a trans person, say something when you see that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's absolutely a good point. Like, it wasn't too long. It was, like, last year sometime. There was this guy that I was talking to through a dating app, and he was very sweet, very charming, really smart guy. But anytime the subject came up of, do you want to meet for a coffee downtown, he was like, I don't know. And when I pressed him about this, I was just like, why? Do you find me disgusting or something? And he's like, no, it's just that, like, well, he was worried that, like, to be seen with me in some sort of dating context would invite, like, abuse from his friends or his peers if we were seen together. And, like, I understand that, you know? Mm-hmm. I get that. But at the same time, like, we're not going to turn the tide against that type of behavior until, well, cis men are not going to turn the tide against that behavior from their cis brothers until they stand up to it.
Yeah.
You know? Like, we have to put up with all kinds of bullshit all the time. And so I personally don't think it should be on us to have to engage in that fight. And so, yeah, while I understand the trepidation of, like, not wanting to be teased by your friends or your coworkers, we're just talking about a coffee downtown.
Yeah.
You know? And that was usually the filter that I would use, actually, to separate chasers from, to separate chasers from a guy who was just attracted, by asking, do you want to meet for a coffee downtown? Because it's a very innocuous, innocent thing. You know, you could be meeting for a coffee because you're roommates, because I'm applying for a job, because we're cousins, or any number of, like, non-romantic related reasons. Mm-hmm. And it's also, I mean, there's a very low incidence of violence in this country. Yeah. But it still nonetheless always made me feel safer to, like, meet someone in public first, you know, just to get a feel for the vibe.
Yeah.
As it were. And so that's another reason why I recommend inviting someone for a cup of coffee. So if you're really worried about getting teased by your friends or coworkers, then go with a coffee, a tea, an art exhibition, something of that nature, which is not necessarily a romantic context at first, anyway. But if the rapport grows, if there's chemistry there, mm-hmm. and something could develop romantically, like, sooner or later, you are going to have to ask yourself, like, what kind of friends do I want to have in my life?
Yeah.
You know, like, are you willing to, like, date a trans person but still be cool with your friends being bigots, mm-hmm. I guess.
Yeah, I find it very hard not to judge people who have bigots in their lives.
Yeah.
Because, like, I can't jive with that, like, because in my experience, people who are racist are also transphobic.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa. Like these things just kind of, like, go hand in hand. So, like, I've begun to, like, section off people when they do these things, just because, like, I don't want to deal with that shit, and I don't want to get my heart broken by the people around me. Yeah.
And even if you're not dating a trans person, like, definitely ask yourself, do you
want to hang around with these hateful people?
Yeah. You know, pretty basic stuff. Like, if you think a friend of yours is transphobic because they're just ignorant and not mm-hmm. educated, and you think you can talk to them, like, more power to you.
Yeah.
You know, but if they're resistant to that, and they've got their mind made up that, like, we're degenerates or whatever, then maybe ask yourself some serious questions about, like, what kind of company you want to keep and how that reflects on you, is what I'd say. Yeah. And speaking of transphobia, if you do go out in public with a trans person, and let's say, like, you're at a bar and some asshole may make some sort of remark to the girl you're with, like, stick up for us, please. Like, immediately. I'm not saying you got to throw down, like, right away, but definitely tell him that they make it very clear to this person that that's not cool, mm-hmm. and that they should apologize. The reason why I think this is important is not because, like, we can't defend ourselves or stick up for ourselves, but rather because we do it all the time. And if you can't demonstrate that you're willing to stand up to transphobia, then I personally would start asking myself questions like, why is this person hanging out with me?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you were hanging out with somebody of another race and some racist said some racist remark to that person and you just stood there and said nothing, like I think that would also be wildly inappropriate.
Yeah. Yes, because it just raises the question, like, how do you speak about me when I'm not in the room?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you let transphobia fly, like, in front of me, like, are you participating when I'm not there?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
That often runs through my mind too, in like non-romantic settings that I've been,
Mm-hmm.
where like someone has like deliberately misgendered me, and the other people in the room don't correct them, but they all look at me, like waiting for me to say something, and then of course I say something, but why does it always have to be me? Why do I always have to do that?
Yeah. This is the reason why when I notice that like when like people are meeting other like trans folks I meet, like they maybe have like they pronouns, I sometimes just like talk, like have like a little talk with them like before.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, because I just don't want that to happen.
The misgendering.
Yeah, the misgendering.
Yes.
Like, if I can just like intercept this misgendering before it happens, like that's. So, yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah, because we don't want to deal with that shit all the time, and it's always worse when it happens to us.
Yes. That's a really excellent point.
Yeah.
I will say though that it's really fortunate that I don't know, speaking as someone who's American by birth anyway, that I feel pretty fortunate to live in this country when it comes to this kind of thing. Like there's no, people don't really use gendered forms of address. Like I can't remember the last time I heard someone say herra or fröken or fru.
No.
And like no one under the age of 65 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And like the transphobia is more subtle.
Yeah.
Than you would encounter in the United States anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still just as important as a cis person to speak up against that, and if this is something that you do in our presence, like that sends a very clear message to us that like, you're probably an ally, you're probably someone that can be trusted, and that, as you said, like when we're not around, that you're probably likely also engaging that behavior as well.
Because like I know it can be devastating to a relationship if we find out that you've been misgendering us behind our back. Like that will devastate the trust and possibly ruin the relationship for good. I don't know.
It would at least be hurtful.
Yeah, like it would leave us with it would leave me and the person with trust issues.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like with anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I think the consistency is important.
Yeah.
The consistency of your principles. So yes, by all means, like, do this not just when you're around us, but when you're not around us, and also do this for your trans friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The trans people that you're not trying to date. Also, it's just basic common decency, more than anything.
Yeah.
Like it's not Nobel Peace Prize material. It's just basic common decency.
Mm-hmm.
But it is deeply appreciated. when it happens. Lastly, I would also advise to like do some reading about trans issues. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, you're in our DMs and you got questions about like, what does non-binary mean, or like, what is the process like? How did you get access to hormone replacement therapy, or like what are like adoption rights for trans people, or whatever. Like, there can be a slew of questions that you might come up with.
Usually when I get these kind of questions, I assume that this person
is a reporter. Is a reporter?
No, it's trans. Like,
really?
Just I'm like, I have so many questions. I don't know what to ask. I'll just ask her. She'll know. Just like trying to prep, like kind of not like not out enough to like say the words, but like out to themselves enough to like looking at options.
That's an interesting observation.
Yeah, that's maybe just my...
No, it's I've like heard this before, actually, that like people get in a lot of what uncommon terminology for like a trans person who's not out yet is an egg, because you hatch. I personally like...
I love it.
Yeah, I like egg. I think it's, even though I think caterpillar is like a nicer concept because you become a butterfly.
I don't want to be an insect.
No, even a pretty insect, like a butterfly.
Maybe.
All kinds of things can hatch from eggs too.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a chicken.
No, it can be a chocobo. Yeah.
It could be. So that is true. When like, so yes, when someone is like questioning their gender identity, or they're out to themselves, but no one else yet, but they still got a lot of questions. Yes, it's not uncommon to ask questions of other trans people. Like, I did the same thing, not through dating apps, mind you, but I talked to trans people when I was questioning my gender, and here I am. But like, if you're just a cis person who's just interested and curious about like some of the issues that we face, or the struggles and the challenges, and or legal applications, or how HRT works, how hormone replacement therapy works, or things like that, like just read up on it, just Google it, and that it saves us both a lot of time, because then we can talk about more fun stuff, like where to go for drinks, or what our favorite books are, or where we shop.
Yeah, sidebar. Do try to get trans issues as told by trans people, because
very good point.
Sometimes the cis don't really know what they're talking about and get a lot of things wrong.
This is true.
So yeah.
No one knows what causes transgenderism. Yeah, avoid any article that uses transgenderism. It's not an ideology.
Or ROGD, rapid onset gender dysphoria.
What? What is this?
This is a conspiracy theory that was made up, like all these kids are becoming trans because of these trans people. They're infecting, like the old homophobia. They're turning your kids gay, kind of thing. Yeah, but definitely. But like with the added bonus of like, no, they're blaming the parents for being homophobic on their kids becoming trans, which is that is an excellent point. Like, the trans issues that you read about, like, be sure the author is trans, and I would add the right kind of. Yeah, it's not like.
Don't listen to Blair White.
Yeah.
Don't listen to Blair White, first and foremost.
No, she's getting paid by the people who want to remove us from remove us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like there are. Wow, that's going to be a whole other podcast talking about transmedicalism.
Mm-hmm.
But suffice to say, like in an executive summary, transmedicalism is the belief that you're not a real trans person unless you experience gender dysphoria and you go through like a certain series of medical processes. And it's gatekeeping, it's elitist, it's classist, it's racist, because not everyone has equal access to these things. Not all cultures or people are interested in these things, and
a lot of the people who adhere to this are both like, you have to pass, you have to, but you cannot have blockers till you're 18.
Yes, you have to look like a cis person, but
you have to look like a cis person, but you have to go through the wrong kind of puberty no matter what, so we can always hold this against you.
Yes.
So yeah, it's horseshit.
Yes. But again, that is all a topic for an upcoming podcast, as it were. But yeah, so do read up on trans issues from trans people who are not terrible. Who are not right wing, basically, I would say. So like in a nutshell, like it's like if you're, a decent guy and you're flipping through dating apps and you see some cutie and you want to get to know her, just try to get to know us as people. Focus more on who we are as individuals rather than our transness. I think is like a good rule of thumb. Like, I don't know, when I had dating profiles anyway, I used to include my interests in the profile specifically for this reason, so that I mean practically like offering topics of conversation on a silver platter.
Yeah.
So that you could open with this instead of asking whether or not I still have a dick. Like that's really not a good opener. I can't stress that enough. Please don't do that.
Yeah.
So if you're coming from a place where you express an interest in who we are as people, if you demonstrate that you will stand up for us when confronted with transphobia, when we're confronted with transphobia, both in your presence and not in your presence, when you show that you've at least done some sort of like cursory elemental reading on the lived trans experience, like I think your chances are going to be much better that things are going to go smoothly for both people, that both people involved are probably going to have a pretty good experience, and that no one's feelings are going to get hurt.
Yeah. Trans person in a relationship with a cis person is probably going to have to do a lot of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So reducing the workload is really appreciated.
Yeah, that's also an excellent point.
Because it will also just like avoid a lot of like unintentional hurt.
Yes.
And like conflicts and arguments and bad feels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all this advice is being offered under the presumption that you want to be good to the trans person that you're interested in.
Yeah.
That you want to be a decent person to the trans person you're interested in.
That you're a good faith actor.
Yes.
Yeah.
A good faith actor, in short. And so that's why we're talking about this. So you can avoid some of these pitfalls that like are fairly common, and however well-intentioned you are, you could end up hurting somebody's feelings, even if you didn't mean to. Like, at the risk of sounding a little philosophical, I think that like intent to harm only matters to a certain extent. Like if you're sitting here and I walk past with like a kettle of boiling water and accidentally spilled it on you, like, yeah, it's good that I didn't intentionally do that, but it still hurts.
Yeah.
And so to avoid doing that, I walk past more carefully, and I watch what I'm doing and make sure there's a lid on it. That sort of thing. This I think is what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, also make real material amends by changing behavior, all that business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That matters a lot more than an apology, like demonstrating changed behavior.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think this is really terribly complex stuff.
No, this is, I thought it was basic, but like this is still stuff I deal with around some cis folks today.
Yeah. Likewise.
So yeah.
Likewise. And but on this note, it looks like we're out of time. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. This is always a pleasure for us, and we have more series coming up. So be sure to tune in, like and subscribe, and all that good stuff.
Click below. Is this one of those things?
I mean, it will be on YouTube as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's probably here.
It's probably on the lower right there. Click on the little bell, as it were. The audio file is on a number of different platforms and formats as well, and we'll be back with you really soon. This has been the Trans Icelandic Broad Cast. Thanks for tuning in, and have a beautiful day.
Bye.
Bye.